Hello, my name is David Contreras. I'm a retired detective sergeant with the San Diego Police Department. I had over 32 years of law enforcement experience. I started my career in 1984 with the California Department of Corrections. From right there in 1988, late 88, August of 88, I joined the San Diego Police Department and I worked there for 27 years.
Now, tell me a little bit about your career working for the CDC back in 1984. What made you? How did you decide that you wanted to go into the CDC?
You know, prior to working for the California Department of Corrections, I was the executive director and founder of a rehabilitation program, a Christian rehabilitation program in San Isidro by the name of New Life Apostolic Outreach. And that program still exists today. So from the age of 18 years old, I founded that program in San Isidro. And by the time in 1984, I was 24 years old. I started with one man, a young, older gentleman by the name of Daniel Aro, which was a hardcore gang member, drug addict from Otay, a gang leader. He was the first man to go through my program. By the time I left the rehabilitation program in 1984, I had 36 men from different state prisons. We had them from San Quentin, from Tehachapi, from Folsom, from San Quentin, like I said, from different Tracy, different state prisons. So it was there that talking to these inmates for 6 years, giving 6 years of my life, helping these individuals, that I decided to take the next step to go into law enforcement. And I started my law enforcement career at CMC, California Men's Colony, which is at that time was a protective custody institution.
What year did CMC? Now CMC is in San Luis Obispo, right?
That's correct, California
And
Men's Colony.
what year did that become a protective custody prison? You talking about all the yards there too?
All the yards. One of the, I think yard one or yard four, I mean, it's been so long, was a psychiatric yard. All the other 3 yards, they were all protective custody. We had Craig Pyre, the CHP gentleman that was convicted of murder. We had ex-police officers, a lot of police officers. We had the Manson killers there, other than Charles Manson. We had Tex Watson. We had child molesters. We had a lot of dropouts from the Nuestra Familia, Black Guerrilla family, Mexican Mafia, and Aryan Brotherhood. A lot of dropouts from the Mongols, Hells Angels. Everybody that was a dropout, they were in my 3 yards, which was yard 2, 3, and I think 4 was psychiatric, but 1, 2, and 3 were all PC yards, protective custody.
And how many PC yards do you think existed between 84 and 88 when you worked for the CDC?
You know, I think every institution, I think CMC was the only yard, to be honest with you. If somebody debriefed, they would send them to the hole, and then from the hole, they would send them to CMC. I don't remember, back in 88, I don't remember any other institution having a PC yard, protective custody yard, like we had at San Luis Obispo. I think San Luis Obispo was probably the only one. After they debriefed, for example, it was a Mexican Mafia gang member, he would debrief at San Quentin, and from right there, he'd be in the hole. And once he went to classification, they would send him to CMC at that time.
Because today, from as I understand it, I think 50% of the prison yards in the CDC are now protective custody.
They probably are. I haven't done that research. There's no need for me to look into it, but I'm sure if I did, I'd probably say it'd probably be a little bit more, to be honest with you.
What are some of the toughest prisons or the toughest prison yards that you've actually witnessed as a correctional officer?
Well, I had the opportunity at the beginning of my career to go to Tracy State Prison. I got a chance to go to Folsom at that time. I got a chance to go to San Quentin State Prison, and also to Soledad to interview people, or for a job interview, because when I went to Soledad, I was there for 1 day, but I also took a tour of the joint. I met with their gang security squad. And the reason why I was there at that time was because I was taking the bilingual test. And that's the only place that they would offer it at the time. The other institutions, I toured them. I got a chance to walk and talk to the security squad, to their gang investigators. Because once I came over to San Diego PD, I was part of the prison gang task force for several years. So we would have monthly meetings at different locations throughout the state. And while we were there, we would go to the institutions either to talk to inmates, or we would go to the institutions to talk to they were back then, they were gang investigators.
Now, the prison gangs back then, when you were in the CDC in 84, 85, they didn't seem as strong or as powerful as they ended up becoming in later years. Was that the case?
No, no, they were just as powerful back then as they are today. There's nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed, a lot of individuals have debriefed. A lot of individuals have dropped out. Back then, they were very strong. I mean, they were recruiting. They were using the Southerners, the Northerns. The NF was using the Northerners. I mean, everything you see today, we had it back then, other than the disruptive groups. I mean, we didn't have what was it, the Bulldogs. We didn't have them in 88, 84 when I was working there. And I also, when Donovan first opened up back in 87, I was part of the activation team. I was actually the officer that received the first inmate, literally the first inmate that arrived at Donovan. I was working R&R, and my job back then was, as soon as they would come in, we take them in. We didn't have R&R back then at Donovan. We had to use building 3, which is the whole today. That was our receiving and release. And I was the one, like you see that movie American Me, where you tell everybody strip down, put your arms up, open your mouth. I was that guy doing that for about a year and a half there at Donovan.
What's it like when a prison is brand new? When inmates are actually opening up a prison, what is that scene like?
Well, I mean, it's very hectic. I mean, it's very chaotic. Because I mean, we every day we would have to go on the yard with metal detectors, because the construction workers, for whatever reason, left nails. They left little pieces of tube of rebar. So I mean, there was those yards. Even though prior to opening the prison, the security squad had gone throughout the yards with metal detectors, we would still find. One of the things that I was very well, I guess I specialized in was working informants. So, but even back then, working R&R, I had numerous informants. So they would actually come in and request to speak to me, and they'd bring me a piece of rebar. They'd bring me some nails that the inmates found. So I think that security was one of the most volatile situations a correctional officer in a new prison is faced with when it first opens, because there's weapons everywhere.
Now, you said working informants. It seems today that there are so many high-ranking criminals that have become informants, that have turned to snitches. In the 1980s, was it more difficult and rare to get a powerful guy to inform or flip, as they say?
You know, Alonso or Alex, everybody talks. I don't care who they are. Everybody talks under the right circumstances. And there's probably going to be people watching your show. They're going to say, I'll never talk. He's the first to talk. He's the first to talk. You know, everybody talks under the right circumstances. And, you know, one of the things that I believe in, that whether you call it destiny, I call it God today. But back then, I just called it luck back then. Under the right circumstances, everybody talks.
But it seems like it is a big deal when you get a bona fide Mexican mafia guy to drop out, because it doesn't happen every day.
Well, of course not. I mean, how can it happen every day? You only have maybe 100, if you're maybe 100 or less bona fide members in the Mexican mafia. I mean, you're looking at 365 days a year. I mean, there's not enough days to have these guys drop out. With time, everybody talks, man. That's all I could tell you. And
Okay,
I learned that in the 5 years or 4.5 years that I was working CDC. And I learned it in 27 years with the San Diego Police Department. And I learned it after I retired from the police department. I became a PI. I opened up a company in Mexico. And even in Mexico, the cartel guys, the politicians, everybody talks under the right circumstances.
Okay, so then at some point you decide that you want to become a San Diego police officer, and you leave the CDC.
Yes, I
Take me
do.
through that.
August of 1988, I left. That was my last day. And you know, Alex, one of the funny things, I was while I was at Donovan, I worked R&R, receiving and release, and it's really funny. Uh, when I left Donovan, as I'm driving away, I felt, I remember looking at the prison. I'm driving my truck. I'm looking at the prison and I'm thinking, now I know what an inmate feels when he paroles. I mean, I literally felt, and I remember saying that, looking at, because you could see the lights, because there was a little road and there was no houses back then. There was just a long, dark road, and it was late at night. And I'm thinking, now I know what all these inmates that I paroled from Donovan, when they were on the bus looking out their window, I know exactly how they felt. So yes, I knew exactly what it was to parole.
Now, it seems like a lot of COs that work for the CDC don't have the qualifications and the know-how to pass a police officer examination and go through the whole thing. How true is that? And what was the reason for you going from CO to an actual police officer for a major city?
Yeah, I disagree with that comment. I think everybody has the knowledge, everybody has the expertise to take, if you want to call it the next level up or the next, whatever level you believe or the person believes that they're taking. I always wanted to be a San Diego police officer. And I'll tell you, I applied for both when I left a New Life Outreach, but I failed the San Diego PD, the test the first time. I took it again, I passed it. At that same time, I took CDC, and CDC called me first. When I was going through the academy, I received a call for San Diego PD for the second interview. They were going to offer me a job, but I was already working for CDC at the time. And I'm telling you, Alex, the best experience a man can get in law enforcement is working in a correctional setting, whether it's a county jail or whether it's a state prison, because you learn how to talk and you learn how to diffuse volatile situations by using your words instead of physical force.
So you get hired by the San Diego PD in
Yes.
1988, and you
August
start a new
August of
career.
'88. Yes.
And take me to the first early years. Did you use a lot of your gang intelligence that you acquired in the CDC as a police officer?
Oh, you know what? There was a big murder in San Diego. It was a triple homicide. And while I was working the prison system, I was working with a prison gang investigator that was assigned to intelligence, Carlos Chacon. And while I was at Donovan, I was feeding him informants at that time, feeding him a lot of intelligence on that triple murder that he was working on. It was the Ronnie and Hector Ayala case. They killed three individuals. They were Mexican Mafia members. It was a dope rip. They killed three individuals, stabbed another individual, two brothers that murdered Chacho, and three other individuals there in San Diego. I think it was in '87, '86. It was a triple homicide, and it was a dope rip. And both of these gentlemen today are in death row because of that. But I mean, just working the prison system, I already had a working relationship with San Diego PD. And while I was going through my training, I was still, informants were still calling me at that time, giving me information. So I came in through to the academy with a lot of knowledge and expertise working law enforcement. It was very different working the streets. But once again, I knew how to talk to people. I knew what a crook looked like. I knew when somebody was under the influence. A lot of individuals that went through the academy with me were ex ball players, were out of the military, had no life experience in the criminal element. Dude, I had that life experience growing up where I grew up. I had that life experience working with drug addicts, hardcore gang members at New Life. I had that life experience working at a prison setting. Now I'm working the streets. So I mean, I had plenty of ammo to hit the streets, and had a stellar career because of it. And
Now
I
that
say that
that
humbly. I say that humbly.
Okay. Now, when you're working San Diego as a police officer, does your work also go across the borders into maybe Oceanside? I guess Oceanside to the north, and actually into Mexico to the south.
Well, I started off as a police officer, fresh out of the academy. They put me in Logan Heights, and Logan Heights, it gets its equivalent like your East LA, like Barrio Nuevo Estrada. It's a neighborhood, and during that time, that's when the Arellanos were coming across the border and recruiting guys from Logan Heights to become assassins for them. So I was there during that whole period when these individuals were doing that. So with my expertise working prisons, working prison gangs, working a lot of gang members, I basically came in and I identified a lot of these players. I knew who they were. Now I had the opportunity to not only arrest these individuals, but also try to help them get out of the gangs, the kids get out of the gangs, and help the family members by educating them what gang violence is and what the gang culture is in those barrios.
Did you ever cross paths with David Popeye Baron?
I chased David Barron many of times. I chased David Barron many of times. He would come across the border. We would get intelligence that he was at a house party. We would hit the house party, and always there was somebody always running, either with a gun in his hand. So we would basically leave the party to chase this guy because the guy had a gun in his hand. We're chasing him, and that gave David Barron several times the opportunity to get away. Later, once we arrested this guy was just a pigeon. He was used, so they had it all planned. The guy would run with a gun, and we immediately, all of us ran after him, called the helicopter. By that time, Barron left several times. But I knew of David Barron. I knew a lot about David. I knew his best friends. I knew his associates, all from Logan Heights at the time. I knew I spoke and I arrested the real Popeye, because David Barron, everybody called him Popeye, but the real Popeye was Jesus Araujo, which was David Barron's right-hand man and assassin in Mexico and also in Logan Heights.
How about another well-known San Diego guy named Batman Marquez? I don't think he was Logan Heights, though.
No, Bat Marquez grew up with me. Bat Marquez I grew up in Chula Vista, Otay area. He grew up right up the street at a barrio called Del Sol. And I could tell you everything. Well, Bat was in Mexico. I chased him in Mexico. I could tell you 3 hour stories about Bat, things. When he got arrested, that's a whole different story. I knew Albert Marquez very well. I knew him very well. And there's a lot of stories on Bat that nobody knows. I got photos, I got pictures, I got so much information on Bat, on homicides that he committed in Mexico, that I was privy to work. I was privy to interview victims, not of the homicide, but the victims of the homicide suspect that Bat is still good for in Mexico.
So out of all these San Diego guys that you ran across and you started seeing that they were developing relationships with the cartel, specifically the Arrellano-Felix, who was the one that really developed and started that relationship? Was it David Barron? Was it Bat Marquez, or was it someone else?
No, Bat Marquez was nothing. I mean, Bat Marquez was a dope fiend who went down there and started working as a drug addict, hitman for David Barron. And it wasn't even David Barron. The one that introduced David Barron to everybody there was Jesus Araujo. He's the one. But everybody, not too many people know that, because everybody focuses on David Barron. David Barron became whom he was because of Jesus Araujo. And you know the story when they were all at that club in, where was it, in Puerto Vallarta, and then David made his bones. It came out on movies and so forth. But before that, the one that actually took David, introduced him, was Jesus Araujo. And Jesus Araujo is still alive today. I believe he's in prison down there. If not, he's still a very powerful individual in Mexico.
Now, the story you're talking about where David Barron made his bones was he basically saved the lives of a whole bunch of AFO guys in a club one night.
Yeah, Christina's nightclub.
Is that a true story?
That's a true story. Yes, it is. It's a true story.
Okay. So over the years, you develop all kind of information, I guess, between San Diego and AFO guys. So let's get into this story of one of the greatest Mexican boxers to ever put on a pair of gloves, Julio Cesar Chavez.
Yes.
I think this guy is like 100 wins and like 2 or 3 losses when he retires. But you guys find out that the cartels want to kidnap him. What year did you guys find this out?
Well, let me tell you briefly. After working for San Diego PD, I had like I said, I worked internal affairs. I worked as special assistant to the chief, liaison to the Hispanic community. I worked gangs. I worked narcotics. I worked. I mean, I worked. I had. Like I said, I was blessed to have had the honor to work with a lot of great police officers, San Diego PD, but a lot of great assignments. One of the assignments that I had in 2009, I got transferred over to the intelligence unit. And that's where I worked in Mexico for 4.5, 5 years, close to 5 years. And while working in Mexico, I developed once again, a lot of sources. I developed a lot of contacts, a lot of business contacts, a lot of politicians, a lot of chiefs of police. I worked a lot with the military. So I did a lot of work in Mexico. So for 5 years, I developed a lot of contacts in Mexico. My last 2 years of my career, I worked in narcotics. And so when I retired, the day that I retired, 2 days later, I had a knee replacement, and I was out of pocket for about 3-4 months. And it was during that time that I basically was like a caged lion, because I was literally addicted to the adrenaline. As a cop, one or twice a day, I would get that adrenaline rush. And all of a sudden, one day, sitting at my house, my phone's not ringing anymore. I'm not getting any more texts. Everything stops. And there's an old saying that says, when the music stops, the pain begins. And it was right there that I was telling myself, well, what am I going to do now? I'm no longer a cop. So that's when I decided to open up a PI company, private investigation company in Mexico, because I had all my contacts that I had made 2 years before in Mexico still giving me information, still talking to me, get together for dinner and so forth. So it was then that I opened up my company in Mexico. During that time, another detective sergeant had retired from the police department, Oscar Armenta. Outstanding. He had worked homicide. This guy had a lot of investigative experience. He started working with me in Mexico. And it was during that time, it was February of 2017 that, before I go on, one of the things that Oscar also specialized in was informants, was persons that gave us sources of information, that would give us information. When we both left the police department, we took a lot of the informants with us. We literally didn't bring them with us, but what I meant is we still kept in contact with them. And while I was working for the police department, we would pay for the information. But because we always treated people with respect, and we always treated them well, and we never revealed their identity, no matter what the case was, these people were very loyal to us because we were loyal to them. So with that said, February of 2017, Oscar and I were in Mexico. His phone rings. He has it on speaker, and it's one of our old informants that was during that time in with the Arellanos in Tijuana. Calls him and he says, "Hey, you've heard of Julio Cesar Chavez?" Oscar says yes, and I'm driving. I'm going, yeah. And because now there's information about a world champion, like you said, a Mexican legend in boxing, and he tells them they're going to kidnap him at his son's fight. His son, Chavez's son, is fighting, and they're going to kidnap him. Okay, what else do we know? We just know they're going to kidnap him, and it's going to be a $2 million reward. Oscar looks at me, and I knew that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was going to fight Canelo Alvarez on May 6th, 2017 in Vegas. So I look at Oscar, and I go, hey, that ain't going to happen in Vegas. These cartel guys, they're going to kidnap somebody. They're going to do it in Mexico, not in the United States. They fear American law enforcement. So I look at him. I go, okay. So he hangs up with him, and he tells me, and I go, it's not going to happen. The following day, that same source calls back again. This time he tells Oscar, yeah, they're going to kidnap him at his son's fight in Rosarito. When Oscar calls me, and I go, Oscar, Julio Cesar Chavez is fighting Canelo in Vegas. They're not fighting in Rosarito. And then we find out, I start Googling it. I find out that yes, Julio Cesar Chavez's younger son, Omar, is fighting Canelo's brother, Ramon, in Rosarito on April 24th, 2 weeks before the Canelo fight in Las Vegas. So now it makes sense. About a week later, I'd say 5 or 6 days later, Oscar gets a second call. And the second call now is from another source that we had into another cartel. It was the Jalisco Nueva Generación. Now, that source was very good. He calls Oscar because, as police officers, we never act upon an informant information unless we have corroborating evidence to basically show us that it might be true. So we had the information. Now he gets another call from another informant who did not know the informant that we had in the Arellano cartel. There's different cartels, and they didn't know each other. He calls them, but now it's a little different. He calls and he tells them, hey, you know what? They're going to pick up Julio Cesar Chavez at his son's fight in Rosarito, but they're not only going to pick him up, they're going to ask for $2 million, but they're not going to release him. They're going to pay the money. They're not going to release him. They're going to assassinate him, and so he's not going to see his family. So whatever you want to do with it, this is and this one gave us a little more information that I can't talk about because it might reveal who the source was, but they gave us a little more information, exactly what hotel, what door. So now we got two individuals, and still we didn't act upon it because we go, you know what, they probably heard it, but it's not going to happen. Well, about 3 days later, I get my call from somebody that I had in the Sinaloa cartel that was working there in Mexicali at the time, and also Tijuana. That source calls me and he goes, hey, they're picking up Julio Cesar Chavez and Rosarito, and now he's giving me more. He didn't give me the information they were going to kill him, but he gives me a little bit more information. Now we have a case, Alex. So now when we get that information, that's when we develop a plan of action and we put it into place.
Obviously, the reason to kidnap someone like Julio Cesar Chavez is for monetary reasons. But why in 2017, after all these years, there's got to be some other motivating reason why the cartel decided, let's do it now.
Well, you got to remember, you mentioned earlier, the Mexican Mafia, the prison gangs in the 80s, were they as bad as they are today? Is there any difference? Same thing with the cartels, Alex. I mean, when the cartels first started, they started as families, but as the years have gone by, the disloyalty, there's been a great change within the cartels. So because of that, I believe Julio Cesar Chavez, my personal belief, grew up in Culiacan, Sinaloa, was the people's champion of Mexico, but he's from Sinaloa. During this time in 2017, there was still a big war between the Arellanos, between Sinaloa, and between Tijuana. What better message to send out than you get a trophy like Julio Cesar Chavez? You kill a trophy like Julio Cesar Chavez. You kidnap a trophy for the Arellanos to display to the world. Back in, 1994, 1993, they killed the priest, El Padrecito Campos Posada in Guadalajara. So these Arellanos, it didn't surprise me when I heard that they were possibly going to kill him, but just receive the money, because these are vicious individuals. These are men that use drugs daily, that aren't thinking like you and I. These are criminals. These are high level criminals who are probably under the influence of cocaine, meth, or any other drug they get their hands on.
Now, let me ask you about the Arrellano-Felix cartel. They're based in Tijuana.
That's correct.
They go back to the 90s, but all of their leadership, including Benjamin, had all been arrested, had all went to jail, have been incarcerated on the U.S. side. How powerful was the AFO in 2017?
Well, once again, I mean, prior to after Benjamin got arrested, and then his brother took it over, and it's kept going from there. There was one of their nephews, a guy they used to call the ingeniero, the engineer. He had got arrested. I think it was in 2015. He had got arrested. So once he got arrested, then other individuals started taking over the Arellano-Felix. Today, there's a guy by the name of Flaquito. That's what they call him, the skinny one. He's the one that's running. He's the main guy, and he's not even an Arellano. And he's the one that is running the Arellano cartel. So I think what happened, if the Arellanos, Benjamin, and his brothers were still alive today, that never would have happened. But because, once again, the years have gone by, the disloyalty, because I mean everybody respects Julio Cesar Chavez in Mexico, but this new generation saw him as a trophy. That's what I believe.
Okay. Now you mentioned that Julio Cesar Chavez is from the Sinaloa area of
Well, he's
Mexico.
he's from Culiacan. I mean, Culiacan
Culiacan.
is the birthplace of the Sinaloa cartel. Yes.
And the Sinaloa cartel was once headed by El Chapo.
Well, it's headed by El Chapo. It's actually the main leader of the Sinaloa cartel was Mayo Zambada. And Chapo was next to him, Güero Palma, Caro Quintero. I mean, the story goes on. Had
Now,
many leaders.
there's always been this conflict between the Sinaloa cartel and the Arrellano-Felix cartel and TJ. What's the source? That conflict goes back many years. Why are these two cartels going at it like that?
Because they were fighting for the territory. San Diego, Tijuana. I mean, that is the busiest port of entry in the world. Every month, 1,000 people walk. I mean, 1,000,000 people, literally 1,000,000 people walk across that border. And if you know what, it's the busiest border in the world. And so they were fighting for that border. They were fighting for that crossing to cross the drugs across. And the Arrellano-Felix was charging Sinaloa a tax for everything that came across. These guys say, why should we pay the tax when we could take it over ourselves? And that's where the war started.
Okay, but the Arrellano-Felix cartel, they're geographically located on the border.
Yes,
so,
Tijuana. Yeah. That was their home base. Yes,
so that's their home base. So it was the Sinaloa cartel a little bit unreasonable to make that request?
Well, no. I mean, once again, you're dealing with criminals with a criminal mind. They don't think like you and I. They don't think like businessmen. You know what I mean? These guys, they don't want a half of the pie. They want the whole pie. So, and the Sinaloa cartel has always been very powerful when it comes to being vicious, having, hundreds of killers at their disposal. So they thought they were just going to come in and take it over, but no, the Arianos fought back. I mean, it's just like right now it's happening in Ukraine. Russia thought they were going to come in and just take it over, but what? It's been 64, 74 days, and they still haven't taken over because the people have fought. And the same thing happened. And right now, there's actually 3 wars going on in Tijuana. You still have a small remnant in 2022 of the Arellanos, but you have Sinaloa strong in Tijuana. And now you got Cartel Nueva Generación de Jalisco, the new generation cartel, also in Tijuana. That's why, 2 years ago, they had over 2,500 murders just in Tijuana. Tijuana has been named for several years now the most dangerous city in the world. Not in the country, in the world. I mean, see, Tijuana is very dangerous. And why? Because you got 3 cartels fighting for control. They call it por la plaza, for the plaza.
Now, is this conflict between the Arrellano-Felix cartel and the Sinaloa, do you think that had an influence over them wanting to kidnap Julio Cesar Chavez?
Well, we're talking about, this conflict, dude. This conflict, Alex. We're talking, this conflict started, in the late 80s. This conflict has been going on for many years. The thing with Julio Cesar Chavez, the opportunity, most crimes occur because there's an opportunity. The opportunity was his son was fighting Canelo's brother in Rosarito. The Arellano cartel controlled Rosarito at the time. So it was easy to bring in whatever they were going to do and get them, pick them up, and kidnap them. It was very easy because they control a lot of the police, they control a lot of the military, they control a lot of the state police, municipal police. So that was the easiest plan for them to take them out, not in Culiacan, but in Rosarito.
Do the fighters ever think that maybe fighting in Rosarito is not a good idea?
Fighters aren't cops. Fighters have no training in security. To them, they train to fight. They never think about, is it dangerous? They don't think like us. And their managers, sad to say, a lot of them don't have the mindset that we have, especially me, former law enforcement, have that, it's dangerous. Things can happen. We make measures to prevent stuff like this from happening.
So once you get the information about this kidnapping that you deem now it's serious,
Yes.
credible information, what kind of plan goes into action?
Well, the first plan is we need to notify Julio Cesar Chavez. During that time, now today, I have a boxing show. I'm very involved in the boxing world. This is as of 2 years ago, but we're talking about 5 years ago. I didn't know anybody in the boxing world. I love boxing. I was that kid when I was 9 years old watching boxing every Saturday night with my father. I could tell you boxers from 1968 all the way to today. I love boxing, but I didn't know anybody in the boxing world. Because of that, the first thing I did, I handled the United States side. Oscar, my partner, the business partner and best friend, handled the Mexican side. So I'm trying to call attorneys in San Diego, boxing attorneys that I had read and Googled about, calling attorneys and promoters in Los Angeles and New York. Nobody's answering my calls. First of all, I mean, why should they? You know what I mean? They don't know who I am. So finally, Oscar contacts one individual. His name is Fernando Beltran. He is the CEO and owner of the biggest boxing promotional company in Mexico. And he had promoted Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and I believe also the father. We contacted him. We set up an appointment to go meet with him. The day that we met with him, I was already in contact with the FBI. I was in contact with a group called, I think they were called the Violent Crimes Task Force. They did over the border investigations. And I was in contact with them. I was feeding them my information because our information was very good. I mean, we had locations, dates, everything that was going to happen. So I'm feeding this information. So now Oscar calls and meets with this man, Fernando Beltran, which is a very powerful man in the boxing world. He's like the Bob Arum of boxing in Mexico. He's a Don King. I don't want to compare him to Don King, but more like the Bob Arum boxing promoter. He's very, very well known in Mexico. So we get a meeting to go meet with him. Well, I mean, as you could see, I'm a pretty big guy. I have a shaved head. I look either like a gangster or I look like a hitman. So, and Oscar is just a little shorter than me, shaved head also. And it's not our fault. God pulled one hair at a time. So I just helped him and shaved it. So now, and the reason why I'm saying is because to meet with Fernando Beltran, I mean, it was an act of God. I mean, this guy had 2 layers of security to go into his office because once again, he knows that Tijuana is a very dangerous city and his office is in the middle of Tijuana. We show up, we go through the first layer of security and now they go through the second layer of security. Now we're sitting in front of this man and here's 2 big Chicanos sitting in front of him, and we're telling him we're former U.S. law enforcement. And for whatever reason, he probably thought that they all looked like Clint Eastwood, or Harrison Ford. But instead, he has 2 Chicanos right there looking at him, and we're telling him they're your fighter, Omar and Canelo Alvarez, his brother. They're going to be fighting. By now, it's like in a month from now, or 3 weeks from now. I mean, it's happening quick. We're telling them the story. They're going to fight and they're going to pick up the father, Julio Cesar Chavez. And he's looking at us, Alex, like, are you kidding me? First of all, are you here to extort money from me? That's number one. I mean, we're very good at reading body language. So I'm looking at him and he's looking at us like, okay, why are you really here? You know what I mean? Are you going to try to kidnap me? And it was during that time that Oscar looks at me and I look at Oscar and I think Oscar tells me, have the FBI call him right now because he doesn't believe us, right? I mean, we could read body language. And it was that time that I got on my phone and I texted my contact with San Diego PD and I tell him, please have the FBI, one of your FBI agents assigned to your group, call Fernando at this number right now, please. And all of a sudden, we could tell that Fernando's phone was vibrating. And he looks at me and he was about to, get the phone and to click on it, the answering machine answered. And it was at that time that I looked at him and I go, please answer that call. And he goes, why? I go, please just answer that call and you'll know that we're for reals. And he answered the call. And as soon as he heard that agent's voice, this is FBI agent so-and-so. We have information. The 2 men that are sitting in front of you, they're no longer law enforcement. They have valid information. And it was that time that Fernando's face literally turned from, oh my God, who's here in front of me, to thank God that we're receiving this information. Now we could start acting. on saving Julio Cesar Chavez, the Mexican boxing legend and icon's life.
Oh, once he takes you serious, Fernando Beltran, what does he do now?
He immediately says, "What can I do?" And the first thing I think it was Oscar or one of us, I don't remember exactly which one, but we recommended change the fight or cancel the fight. That's number one. Second thing you need to do, you need to take us to meet with Julio, and we need to tell him face to face what is it exactly that they're going to do, and if the information that we have is correct, for him to confirm that we're right. And he did that. He took us to meet Julio. And one of the things that surprised me with Julio, for whatever reason, I had never met him in person. I always consider him to be a little taller, a little thicker. He was a little man. And but I mean, the guy has a heart of a lion. I'm telling you, this guy is outstanding. And when I met him, the first thing he said to me, he looked at me and he goes, "Oh my God, you look like Mike Tyson." I remember him saying that. And we sat down, and he got a cigarette. He started getting a little nervous because we started breaking down everything that was going to happen. And as we're breaking it down, he says, "Yes, you're absolutely right. I was supposed to go in this car. I was supposed to go through that door." So everything was confirmed. And it was right there and then that Oscar started working with our Mexican counterparts, and I started working with American counterparts. And the rest, I'm going to leave it. The reason why is because one of the reasons why we're here is because tomorrow night, Friday night at 8 o'clock on our channel, Police and Fire and Publishing, we're telling the story for the first time also on my boxing channel, Rolling with the Punches TV. We're going to tell the story, and we're going to tell exactly what we did that prevented the fight, and also what we did to save Julio Cesar Chavez's life. But it was a very, very, I'll tell you, Alex, it was a very, very interesting investigation. And the end result is we still have Julio Cesar Chavez today, so we saved him.
So how
by
could
the grace
everyone?
of God.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to give away too much of this of your project that's dropping. So how could everyone find and watch this this story?
Alex, tomorrow night at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, on our YouTube channel, which Mundo also shares with us, Police and Fire Publishing YouTube channel. Look under Sheepdog Assist, and that show's going to come on. We're going to talk about it. It's like 30 minutes long, but it's a very interesting story. Also, if you could log on YouTube channel called by the name of Rolling with the Punches TV, and on that channel, also, we will be publishing the entire video, the entire interview at 8 o'clock sharp Pacific Standard Time tomorrow night, Friday, May 6th.
So I guess after it drops and everyone watches it, we'll do another interview and we'll go into detail.
Most definitely, yes.
Because we
most definitely.
We don't want to give away the story here.
No, we don't.
Let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
You got into the boxing world. Was this situation, was this incident kind of got you more involved into your career into the boxing world?
No, not at all. Because we continued as you know, Alex, we saved a lot of people's lives. We saved pastors' lives that were kidnapped. We did a lot of anti-kidnapping negotiations in Mexico. We continued with our work. This was just another case. And the only reason why I'm talking about it now, because it brought to my attention that this week Canelo Alvarez is fighting against Bivol on Friday, May 7th. And that's the only reason I told Oscar, we should do a story about what we did for Julio 5 years ago, because it's the same time period. That's the only reason why. We continued working other very important cases, just as important, and saving lives. We continued that.
Now,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, gathering this intelligence for someone like Julio Cesar Chavez is a lifesaver.
Yes, it is.
But it doesn't always happen. You mentioned earlier the Catholic priest that got killed in the airport in Tijuana, Juan Jesus Posados Ocampo.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there was no intelligence to save him. No. Or actually, that hit wasn't even for him in the first place.
No, it wasn't.
So it would have been impossible to save him. But there's so many people that end up, becoming victim to these cartels regardless.
Well, I'll tell you, Alex, if I had a message for Julio, I would tell him, thank the Lord Jesus Christ that God allowed us to receive that intelligence. It's by the grace of God that he's alive. And I don't know if you know this about Julio or not, but he was a drug addict for many years. Even when he was fighting his latter years, he was addicted to cocaine and other drugs. But now today, Julio actually has opened up several rehabilitation programs that are very successful in Mexico, and he's actually pro pro police, pro law enforcement, pro community, helping a lot of the drug addicts throughout Mexico and also in the United States. So we are blessed that we were able to help him, and today he's fulfilling a great mission, which is helping people that are in dire need of his assistance.
Now, do the cartels understand that when they go out and do something as crazy as trying to kidnap a legendary boxer and then wanting to kill him, that that's going to be almost the end of that cartel, at least temporarily? Because when they killed the Catholic priest in 1993, law enforcement came down on the AFO with almost all the resources that were available at the time.
I'll tell you, Alex, if they would have fulfilled that mission, it wouldn't have been law enforcement. It would have been Sinaloa that would have dropped an atomic bomb in Tijuana. Because Julio Cesar is a legend. And I wouldn't doubt it if Cartel Nueva Generación Jalisco, Memo, Mencho or Ceguera, if he also would have joined forces at that time to destroy, annihilate the Arellano cartel. Because, Julio Cesar Chavez, like I said, he's an icon. He's a man that Mexico loves. So I think that, yes, I think that not only law enforcement, but I think within the cartels, they would have destroyed the Arellano cartel.
And lastly, before I let you go, did you hear that Benjamin from the Arrellano-Felix cartel is requesting early release right now? How do you feel about that? He's 68 years old. Does this man deserve to be free?
You know what? I believe in God's grace. I believe in God's mercy, but I also believe in justice. He only got 25 years, and that man is responsible for over 1,000 murders.
Whoa.
Women today in Mexico, all over Mexico, are still looking for their lost ones that he was responsible for their murders. Whether he pulled the trigger or not, he was responsible. And how many other murders, how many other overdoses have occurred in America, have occurred in our neighborhoods, have occurred with our family members? That man should thank God, first of all, and should thank his lucky stars that he only got 25 years. He's responsible for many murders. So, you know what? I believe in God's grace. I hope he finds the Lord in there. But you know what? He does not deserve early release. He should thank the Lord that he only got 25 years.
It seems highly unlikely. It seems highly unlikely that the federal government, the U.S. federal government, would grant his early release based on, and he's requesting it based on compassionate grounds because of his age.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. Even if they do grant him release, which I know they're not, but if they do grant him release, as soon as he crosses the border, same thing happened to Güero Palma. We granted him early release. Well, we granted him release. As soon as he crossed the border, the federales were waiting for him, and he's still locked up in Mexico today, fighting other criminal charges that Mexico basically brought up after he was already did his prison time in America. So same thing's going to happen. Benjamin will never see the light of air. Will never see the light of day. We release him. Mexico's going to be waiting for him, and they're going to lock him up.
Okay, David Contreras. Yes. Thank you very much for sitting down with me. What is the name of the project that's dropping again?
It's the life of, it's the kidnapping of Julio Cesar Chavez, the first time we ever tell the story. And it's going to be on our 2 YouTube channels, Rolling with the Punches TV, and also on Police and Fire Publishing YouTube channel, tomorrow, May 6th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
All right. I'll be tuning in, and hopefully everybody else that's watching this interview will check it out too.
Thank you, Alex, and God bless you.
Thanks for watching StreetTV.net. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button below and click the bell to receive alerts and notifications.
Feel free to comment below so you can give us your feedback, and be sure to watch the 2 related episodes to the right. If you want to support this platform or follow us on social media, visit the links in the description, and thanks for watching StreetTV.net.